My wife friend-zoned me and told me that she felt disgusted after being intimate with me. As a result, I started acting very distant with her. She completely lost it. My wife and I recently started couples therapy, and during one session, she admitted that she no longer loved me. She said she only viewed me as a best friend. She explained that she loved me in a platonic way, which was one of the main reasons she hadn't wanted to be intimate with me for the past 3 years. Later that day, she also mentioned that she had built up a lot of resentment toward me. She believed it was because I spent more time with our children than with her, and this resentment had caused her to start thinking about other men. I was completely lost as to how to move forward until the other night, when she came home drunk and begged for intimacy. At first, I refused, but she kept pushing until I gave in. The next morning, she woke up feeling disgusted with herself. Once again, she told me she saw me as a best friend and that, throughout her life, she had a rule about never being intimate with friends. That same day, we had a deep, honest conversation. She told me all she wanted was companionship, meaning the dynamic of co-parenting and living as roommates. I asked her what I had done or what was it about me that made me so unattractive or undesirable. Her answer was simply, "I don't know." She said she still loved me, but it wasn't the same. She had been feeling disconnected for years, and our marriage had become too much work for her. Right now, her focus was only on the children, and she found my contributions as a co-parent meaningful. I'm confused, frustrated, and uncertain about what to do next. One of the things that has really been bothering me is the word resentment. It's been eating away at me, especially since my wife keeps saying she doesn't know why she feels resentful or why this has been affecting her emotionally and mentally. I brought this up again with our therapist, and we revisited the topic of being married for so long, 15 years, and being together since we were 14. Our long history of growing up together and having children when we were just 19 drastically changed the course of our lives. We went through severe poverty and many hardships, and we essentially had no social life for the past 10 years because we were so busy raising our children. 2 kids, now 12 and 14. The therapist asked my wife a lot of questions, mostly about her feelings toward all of this. About 90% of her responses were focused on the kids. It really felt like she was avoiding saying yes because it would make her feel guilty or ashamed, as if it would mean she regretted having children. I pointed this out, and the therapist encouraged her to look at this from a more personal perspective, not just through the lens of being a mother. It was very eye-opening. My wife mentioned how frustrated she was about all the things she missed out on in life, but she also made it clear that she didn't feel like she missed out on other partners, dating, or partying. However, she did say that she lost all of her friends. This was a significant moment because one of the biggest issues in our relationship has been how isolated we've been. I reminded her that it's important to have good friends and to make time for herself and her friendships. Over the past 3 years, we've had multiple conversations about how crucial it is to maintain friendships, especially when you have similar peers who can help with life's challenges, things we might not know how to handle or just for enjoyment. However, she's always avoided investing in friends, even though she's someone who thrives on external social stimulation. The main reason she gave for not prioritizing friends or even herself was always the kids. As I mentioned earlier, 90% of her responses always came back to the kids. At this point in our session, I started to realize that the common denominator in most of the issues and frustrations she was experiencing was the kids. So I asked her, "Do you think you might be upset with me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant when we were so young and wasn't ready?" She said she wasn't upset with me for that, but she acknowledged that it was unreasonable to blame me because it takes 2 to have children. I felt like this was progress because it gave us something to work on and helped us address some of the burdens. We agreed to spend more time nurturing good friendships, both together and individually. Toward the end of the session, we discussed what actions we would take from this conversation. By this point, things were still unclear and uncertain. I asked my wife very directly about her plans moving forward. She told me that she still had no desire to be intimate with me right now. She reiterated that she loves me deeply, but she feels guilty for not being there for me. I also brought up the brief period of swinging, which for the 50th time, she said wasn't an issue. I agree with her on this. It seemed like a mechanical attempt to solve a problem that really didn't exist when we tried it. We both had no issue with this. We acknowledged it happened, tried it, and mutually decided to stop, turning the page. I also brought up other life events that might have contributed to the resentment, but ultimately, we didn't make much progress in understanding the root of her feelings, which was disheartening. I then told my wife that I wouldn't accept this arrangement. I explained that I've truly done everything I can, and that this issue has reached a point where it no longer has anything to do with me or requires me to change what I'm doing. I was direct and clear, stating that I wouldn't accept this dynamic, and that I need to be with someone who is actively engaged in our marriage, working towards solutions and committed to maintaining an intimate relationship. I emphasize that I won't just be a convenience, and there's more to life than merely being roommates and co-parents. I made sure to express my deep love for her and my desire to make this work for the better. I also told her that I'm fully committed to this marriage, as long as she is too. If she's not, I told her that it's okay, but I won't be part of something where my efforts aren't reciprocated. I reassured her that I have no plans to leave and that I don't want a divorce. However, I made it clear that if this dynamic continued, divorce would be the only outcome. Tears were shed, and the session ended on a very bleak and somber note. Still, nothing was resolved, and I left feeling discouraged but determined to begin working on the 180 degrees shift right after we left the session. It's painful and difficult because much of the 180 degrees requires me to be distant, cold, and transactional. The hardest part is realizing that this dynamic is already very cold and transactional. Here's where it gets interesting. I started implementing many of the 180 degrees recommendations that same day. I told my wife that things were going to be different from now on. I would honor our co-parenting and roommate dynamic without complaint, but made it clear that I'm not happy with it and will never accept it. I'm done working on it if she's not going to make an effort. She agreed and went to bed. I began building distance and focused on myself, being short and transactional. She asked for help with some personal matters, but I declined, which really shocked her. She was upset, calling me petulant. I explained that she is now fully responsible for her own life and her own issues. We didn't speak all day except when absolutely necessary. I kept this up for a few days, and she became visibly upset and stressed. Normally, I respond with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night, she was crying, saying she was stressed, and that something was wrong with me because I was indifferent. I just listened, then told her that this is a dynamic she proposed, and now I'm simply taking care of myself and focusing on me. I won't lie, it's been tough being cold and distant because, as I mentioned, I love her and wish I could hold her and show affection. However, I know that doing so might be manipulative, keeping me in the friend zone while she gets her way. So, I've been sticking to the course. We're now almost a week into the 180 degrees shift, and there have been noticeable changes on her part. I think she's starting to realize that there's more to me than just a friend and co-parent. A few days ago, I sent her a message outlining the household bills and suggested splitting the financial responsibilities 50-50ths. She lost it, saying it came out of nowhere. I responded, saying that friends share things 50-50, and as her friend, I expect nothing less. This was a big revelation because it showed me how much I've been taken for granted and how she's been comfortable at my expense without realizing it. Still, I pressed on and told her that this is a new dynamic she asked for and that it's still a good deal because she'd be fully responsible for everything if she were on her own. I'll wrap up by saying that while the 180 degrees shift has been helpful in many ways, I'm still deeply saddened by the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements and realizations that have been difficult to process, but they've also sparked new efforts on her part. She's definitely reaching out to me more, and while it's hard to turn her down, I hope that if things improve, this change continues. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself, aside from being a mom, which is a huge step. She had neglected herself for years, so seeing her focus on herself has been a positive change. My hope is that, as we both work on ourselves, our marriage will improve. But at this point, it's hard to say where things will go. We're on good terms, cordial and amicable, which is a positive sign. Boundaries are set, and expectations are clear. No matter what the future holds, I feel that the right foundation is in place. I will make peace with everything that has transpired. We will continue attending therapy, working on our relationship until we either revive our marriage or decide to part ways. Having an impartial third party has been incredibly helpful, both as a witness and as a guide through this process. No matter what, my love for my wife will always remain. However, I cannot accept a marriage devoid of intimacy because we both deserve more. We're now nearing the 9-week mark of the 180 method I mentioned earlier, and it's starting to yield positive responses from my wife. So much has shifted, and it seems to be moving in a more promising direction. This past Memorial Day weekend, my wife asked if I wanted to grab a coffee because she had something important to discuss. This was a monumental moment because I can't remember the last time she asked me to talk about something significant. I must admit, I was filled with anxiety and concern, my mind racing with countless possibilities about what this could be. Naturally, I agreed, and we took some time away from the kids to have this conversation at a local coffee shop. The conversation was highly constructive, providing a wealth of valuable insight into her emotions and mindset, which helped me understand where she's at both mentally and emotionally. We summarized the core issues we're facing, and she asked me for help. This was completely new, and I cannot express how thrilled I was to hear such a genuine request from my wife, who had been distant for the past 3 years. After she finished sharing her thoughts, I proposed a plan that I felt was right for us. It was something I had been mulling over for weeks, intending to bring it up in a couple of months if I didn't see any improvement. This moment, however, felt like the right time to present it, especially since it aligned with what she had shared and the help she was asking for. I began by acknowledging her feelings and concerns, assuring her that they were valid. I told her that I cared deeply about how she feels, because I don't like the thought of her being sad or depressed. I also reminded her that my goal has always been, and will always be, for us to reconcile and be the happily ever after we once envisioned. My love for her remains as strong, if not stronger, than when we first made our vows. I continued the conversation by expressing how I've been feeling and how it affects me daily. I clarified some of the things she mentioned regarding my recent emotional distance. I explained that my behavior wasn't personal, but rather a means of protecting myself from further rejection and neglect. It wasn't an attack on her. It was simply a safeguard because, ultimately, I can't control her, only myself. This led naturally into the heart of my approach, self-accountability. I explained that for too long, I had been focused on trying to make her happy by doing things I thought she wanted or needed. But I was consistently met with rejection and disappointment, which created a lot of stress for me. I realized that I had to make a change for myself. After all, I can only control my actions and the changes I make for myself. I shared that I had started to implement new habits and routines aimed at personal growth, all while fulfilling our shared responsibilities, such as parenting, finances, and daily tasks. My goal is to improve myself, both as a husband and a father, to become healthier and more fulfilled. She was very receptive to this and expressed that she noticed the positive changes. She also admitted that she had begun to recognize that much of what had affected her negatively was her own doing. Toward the end of the 3-hour conversation, there was a palpable spirit of reconciliation. I reaffirmed that my goal was to make this work, but I was clear that I wouldn't continue living under the current circumstances. Here's what we agreed upon. We are both responsible for our own happiness. The key is recognizing that neither of us is obligated to make the other happy. We must each seek out what personal fulfillment looks like for us. While we are welcome to support each other in this process, it is not required. We are each responsible for our own journey, and that means taking the necessary steps to grow, change, and heal. We can offer help to one another when it's requested, but unsolicited advice is off limits. Open and honest communication is essential, so nothing goes unsaid. If something wasn't brought up or discussed, it was never addressed. We also agreed that a list of needs and wants would give us clear guidance in meeting each other's needs and allow for mutual choices, whether to compromise or decline. This list is not to serve as a checklist for accountability, and we agreed not to use it as a point of contention. It's a tool for growth and clarification. We both committed to ensuring that any action we take is done, because we truly want to make our spouse happy, not just to fulfill a task. It's about choosing to do something for them out of love, not obligation. We also set a deadline for Memorial Day 2025 as a definitive point to evaluate our progress. At that time, we will decide independently if we're happy and whether we want to stay together. If we decide we're not happy, divorce will be the next step. We will each take full responsibility for what happens, including if needs were not met. If a need wasn't addressed, we'll ask if we did everything to resolve it. If we did, we can walk away knowing we did our best. But if we didn't, it means we didn't prioritize that need enough. The main motivator for change is to be driven by our own desires, not external pressure. This shift will, in turn, encourage positive changes towards each other. The goal is that everything we do for each other will come from a place of genuine love, not as a duty. As of today, I've noticed some of the most significant changes. My wife has committed to therapy and is addressing her mental health more proactively, including taking antidepressants, which have helped her mood. She seems more confident and happier, and we have started exploring deeper forms of intimacy, including physical touch and affirming words.